You are listening to the Keeping It Juicy podcast,
your main squeeze in nutrition.
Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon on YouTube so you can get notified every Tuesday when we upload a new episode.
You can also add us on Facebook and Instagram at Keeping It Juicy Podcast. Ooh. Ooh. I'm kidding.
Oh my God.
As you guys couldn't tell, Halloween is almost near.
Yes. So when this episode launches, it'll be Tuesday. Halloween is Thursday. I think I'm not really in the spirit, to be honest.
Wow, really?
I avoided every Halloween party at all costs.
Oh, Lord. I actually went to a Halloween party last night.
So. I saw.
Yeah, so
No,
I'm all about that.
I'm just not in the mood. It might be because San Diego's having like 90-degree weather. That might play part of it.
Really? I'm surprised because we're actually getting cool weather over here in Texas.
No, it's been really hot. So I'm not in that fall mood right now.
I was almost out of it when I walked into Walmart yesterday, and I was very upset when I saw a Christmas tree.
I know.
And Halloween isn't over.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like you shouldn't. I don't know.
Not at least until November. Like I feel like November 1st, it's mildly appropriate to start putting out Christmas stuff. But if Halloween hasn't passed, like, please don't start.
So, as we get sidetracked, so episode 46 is all about our nutrition myths that you might hear about, especially in today's society. And we'll probably just go into that and how much of a myth they are. So we'll go into those.
Just like the proper response if someone kind of asks you about these things.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll go into those spooky tales later after this new nutrition in the news. So basically this new nutrition in the news that I found out was actually pretty interesting. We don't really touch upon this topic that often. So basically it's about how a high salt diet may lead to cognitive decline. So as we all know, Alzheimer's is a growing area of research. So this article itself, which we'll attach a link in the show notes, basically it talks about the findings that it came across when they conducted 2 studies on mice. They're different studies, and they studied the interaction of salt and Alzheimer's. And they actually found something surprising. So basically these scientists performed behavioral, cerebrovascular, and molecular studies, which revealed that the low levels of nitric oxide that were induced by a high salt diet affects the level of tau protein in the brain. So before you get confused, I'm going to break it down a little bit. So basically nitric oxide, if you guys don't know, basically helps expand the blood vessels. So basically when you have a high salt diet, it's gonna restrict that blood vessel, and obviously it's gonna lower the levels of nitric oxide in the blood. So another thing that they came across was there was an excessive buildup of tau, and that is spelled TAU, and that is also a hallmark of Alzheimer's. So what tau is it basically supports neurons by stabilizing structures called microtubules, which transport nutrients to neurons' axons and dendrites. So they are part of the cytoskeleton, basically the big structure that supports these neurons that basically keeps our brains working. So they add that tau should not be roaming freely inside the cell because if it detaches from that cytoskeleton, that structure, it has the potential to build up in the brain, leading to cognitive difficulties. So basically they found out that nitric oxide does put the brakes on activity caused by a series of enzymes that lead to tau disease. So basically, high salt in your food leads to a decrease in nitric oxide, which leads to tau protein buildup, which all of that cascades into more cognitive issues. So I thought that was a pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's a new kind of concept. Like, we know high salt has its whole relationship with high blood pressure, cardiovascular, and more studies are starting to disagree with that. So
I don't know.
I don't know either. It's interesting. But we also know that high salt diets can lead to like stomach cancers as well, but I've never heard it linked to Alzheimer's. So that's a new kind of relationship that they're noticing.
Right.
We'll see. And this is animal studies, so human trials will be better in the long run, but we'll see.
Right. So this is just something interesting. Obviously, it kind of makes sense if you think about if your blood
if you follow the process, yeah.
Right. If your blood vessels are smaller, you're getting less blood flow throughout the body, including your brain. So that makes sense. But the fact that this tau protein was discovered, that buildup was pretty interesting. So let us know your guys' thoughts on this. It's just something different. So yeah.
Definitely. So now we'll kind of jump into the main nutrition myths that we hear all the time and debunk them, and again talk about what a good response is. The first one that I hear all the time is fruit is bad because it's high sugar. I'm sure you guys have heard this too, and at some point saw a very convincing article trying to tell you otherwise. But the fact is, fruit does contain sugar, duh, but it also contains fiber. So sugar, when it's like added to foods, would be wise to limit, like the sugar found in sodas and highly processed foods. And this sugar in these foods is readily available, and it doesn't come with other nutrients. So if you think about a soda, it's pretty much sugar, water, a couple other flavor enhancers, and coloring. So there's nothing else really in there.
That actually reminds me of a Dave Chappelle skit when he talks about like purple drink. He's like, sugar, water, purple. That's what he processed drinks in.
Pretty much. He ain't wrong. He ain't wrong. So getting back to this, the sugar in those are readily available because there's really nothing else in there for your body to, nutrients for your body to absorb. But when you eat fruit, apple, pear, peach, berries, all of these different types of fruit, the sugar comes literally wrapped and entwined in fiber-rich, water-rich, and like this nutrient-rich package for you.
Little loving package that Mother Nature gave you.
Exactly. It's not just sugar. It's nice and nutritious for you. So the fiber that kind of wraps around the sugar, it's entwined, it slows down that insulin response and the release of sugar into your bloodstream, preventing a huge blood sugar spike. Especially if you eat fruit as part of a meal or a snack that contains proteins and healthy fats, you're not going to see a huge spike as you would if you drink a soda or something like that. So we do not recommend ditching out on the fruit because you will miss out on some very key nutrients. Fruits are not just vitamins and minerals, but they also have phytochemicals, plant-based compounds that do have a positive benefit on health. Pigment-rich berries and cherries are also really great sources of phytochemicals. But other fruits like apples, oranges, they do have phytochemicals as well. But you want that color, that's where the phytochemicals kind of live at. And even though soda is colorful, I'm sorry, it does not have phytochemicals. So
you can't justify that.
I eat the rainbow. No, it's
no, this is not a Skittles commercial.
Yeah. So Don't skip out on the fruit. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely don't. Unless you just really hate fruit, then I'm sorry that you were treated that way.
Yeah.
Anyways. So with that being said, let's go into the next nutrition myth. And this is you need to eat breakfast. That's just something that's being thrown around all the time. Mm-hmm. And apparently this breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It's something we have all heard before. We've heard it from parents, health bloggers, doctors, and a whole bunch of ad campaigns. But the health advantages of consuming a regular breakfast has been overhyped. I mean, especially if you're not a breakfast person, which we'll get into that. So people who are hashtag team breakfast have pointed to observational studies showing a higher BMI in breakfast skippers. However, clinical trials have pointed to personal preference being a huge critical factor. Some people will subconsciously compensate for all the calories they skipped at breakfast, while others won't feel cravings of that same magnitude. So there was a trial where women who didn't habitually eat breakfast were made to consume it. They gained nearly 2 pounds over a 4-week period. So individual responses do vary. So don't try to force yourself into this eating pattern that doesn't sit well with you or that you just can't sustain. It may end up backfiring on you. So another popular claim is that skipping breakfast can crash your metabolism. Ooh. But studies in both lean and overweight individuals have shown that skipping breakfast does not inherently slow your resting metabolic rate. So one area where the don't skip breakfast mantra might hold true is in people with impaired glucose regulation. These individuals might want to play it safe and avoid skipping breakfast in order to achieve better day-to-day glucose management. And I'm specifically talking about those that have diabetes. So the truth, you don't need to eat breakfast to be healthy or lose weight. That's just not a solid fact that you can make, that you can basically insist on other people. You should base your breakfast consumption on your personal preferences and personal goals. And just feel free to experiment to see if you want to make skipping breakfast a habit or if you don't want to. I mean, personally, for me, I mean, I used to try to eat as soon as I woke up, but I ended up, over the years, my habits have completely changed. Like maybe 2 to 3 hours go by, then I eat breakfast. That's just, it changes.
It will change. And I can attest to that too. Like when I first started like weight training, I would eat breakfast as soon as I woke up because I was starving. But now that I'm not lifting like quite as heavy, my appetite has, taken kind of a hit, I guess, which is very natural. But imagine if I still kept up that same eating pattern and I'm not exerting as much energy, of course I'd gain weight. So your habits will change over time depending on, many other factors. And it also will depend, like, did you have a huge dinner the night before? If you did, you probably won't be hungry right when you wake up.
But I need to eat breakfast.
So the next myth that we want to debunk is you need to eat protein right after your workout. That anabolic window.
Right after. You're going to lose all of it.
Exactly. You're going to lose the gains just like that. So those people just don't have a proper concept of how muscle is built, clearly.
They don't have a place in my life anymore.
Right. So we'll jump into that process a little bit. But when you exercise, you do cause damage to your muscles. These are those little micro tears, and that damage needs to be repaired. When that damage is repaired, your muscles get stronger or more resistant and bigger, yada, yada, yada. You don't build muscle right after a workout. It does not happen. The repair process takes time. So the raw materials that are needed for muscle growth, we know that are protein. That's why this whole anabolic window has gained a lot of traction. So the idea that you do need protein right after workout isn't completely a myth as much as it is an exaggeration. So consuming about 20 to 40 grams within 2 hours of your workout would be ideal, but it's not necessarily necessary. Ideal and necessary are completely different things. what matters most is the protein intake throughout the day. So a lot of people ask, well, how much protein do I need? Well, it varies for literally everyone. To maximize your muscle repair, generally 1.2 to 2.2 grams per kilogram is okay. But intake over 2.2 grams per kilo, which again, that's a lot. That's like over
a shit ton.
That's over a gram per pound. The conversion's not quite equal, but that's a lot of protein. But studies show that over 2.2 grams per kilogram does not show any additional muscle growth than just staying within that range. So, but for the general population, the general rule of thumb for those just trying to maintain muscle and stay healthy, 0.7 grams per kilogram, again, is that general rule of thumb. But to build muscle, 1.2 to 2.2 is that range. It's different for everyone, and it matters getting that much protein throughout the whole day, kind of evenly spaced apart. You can't get it all at one meal and say, oh, I'm done. Like, you can't drink like 5 protein shakes and say you got your protein for the day. Like, you want it to be evenly spaced apart, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, 5 minutes after your workout. So kind of debunking this myth, the truth is you don't need protein immediately after your workout, but again, 20 to 40 grams over the next couple hours. Generally 2 is ideal, but it's not necessary. So keep that in mind.
If you tell that to any of those bodybuilders, they're going to give them a heart attack.
I know. And it comes down to, what works for everybody. I mean, I've talked about this when we did the episode on my prep. Like, I was eating a ton of protein before that, like an insane amount, but that's what my body had gotten used to. Mm-hmm. So when it got cut significantly, I felt like crap. Like, she cut my protein like over 80 grams.
Well, she's overnight. Not in your life anymore.
Exactly. But, that's why it's different for everyone. And the range is pretty big, 1.2 to 2.2 or 0.7. That's a huge range because we're talking grams per kilogram.
Right.
So something to keep in mind.
So on that topic of protein, the next myth is too much protein is bad for your bones and kidneys. So let's tackle these 2 claims one at a time. So more protein in the diet has been linked to more calcium in the urine. 2 reasons have been suggested to explain this phenomenon. Your body draws from its calcium stores within the bones to buffer that acid load caused by dietary protein. This has led researchers to suggest that higher protein intake could cause greater bone loss. Again, theory. So most studies that looked at protein intake and calcium excretion list dairy products as a protein source. So higher urinary calcium could simply be the result of higher calcium intake. So more calcium in equals more calcium out, basic. Right. So therefore, looking only at calcium excretion was not enough. So subsequent studies showed that dietary protein promotes dietary calcium absorption, and that higher protein intake promotes bone growth and retards bone loss, whereas low protein diet is associated with a higher risk of hip fractures. So
that could be, if you have low protein, you have low muscle mass, which means you're frail and you break easily.
Right, you don't have enough muscle to support that bone. So all in all, current evidence suggests that protein actually has a neutral or even a protective effect on bones. So other studies determined that high protein diets increase glomerular filtration rate. That's also known as GFR. This is a marker for waste filtration in the kidneys. Also, we look at this in dialysis. It was argued that increased GFR was a sign that undue stress was put on the kidneys. But later research has shown that kidney damage does not occur as a result of diets high in protein. Damn. I wish I could have used that to use against those carnivore people.
Oh
Anyways,
my gosh.
So in conclusion, randomized trials thus far have not shown high protein diets to have harmful effects on the bones or kidneys in otherwise healthy adults. The truth? protein, even in large amounts, is not harmful to your bones or kidneys unless you suffer from a pre-existing condition. Obviously, if you have chronic kidney disease stages 1 through 3, eating a shit ton of protein is going to cause ultimate damage to your kidneys. But if your kidneys are healthy, functioning, your GFR is way up there, I would not worry about it at all.
Protein specifically,
Protein, yes.
Not, we're not talking about other dietary patterns, but just protein is not going to contribute to poor kidney health. Okay, so moving on to our next myth. I feel like this one is kind of getting pushed on the back burner a little bit now that intermittent fasting is making.
Whoa, we're the new reigning champions of all the diets.
I don't know if intermittent fasting is making a comeback or if it's like becoming, I don't know, but this myth, I would say, was super popular like 5, even 10 years ago. So the whole small frequent meals thing, which is supposedly supposed to help your metabolism be a calorie burning machine and super efficient and yada yada. So I don't know. It is often claimed that people should eat many small meals throughout the day to keep your metabolism high. The kind of concept behind this is that to digest food, your body does burn calories. Mm-hmm. So when you're constantly eating small, frequent meals, you're constantly digesting your food, which is constantly making you burn calories. So the concept is, it's weird, it kind of makes sense, but then at the same time, it kind of doesn't. Like for your hormones and whatnot, should you constantly be digesting food? Intermittent fasting will argue completely,
Right.
So,
I mean, I'm the personally, in my opinion, I'm the most for this in regards to diabetic patients.
Right. This is completely different story.
That is mainly for blood sugar control.
Of course. Yeah. And but for the general people who don't have that issue,
I mean, I would say only do it because you want to do it, not because you feel like society pushes you to do it, because everybody has different lifestyles.
Exactly. So of the studies that actually looked at this, eating 2 to 3 meals per day had the exact same effect on total calories burned as 5 to 6 or more smaller meals. And this is the same calorie level. So it's not like the 2 to 3 meals ate more calories or something like that. Again, these are studies where the food is like provided and everything is tracked. Mm-hmm. If you have a hard time on your own eating 2 to 3 large meals without going over your calories, then don't do it. You're eliminating the whole purpose behind it. Eating frequent meals may have benefits for some people, like those who are just kind of always hungry and have a big appetite. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to affect the calories that you burn. It's more of a personal choice. Mm-hmm. Me, I have a appetite always, so I prefer to eat more frequently. But it's all about those. Are you overdoing it on your total calories? Right. If you're only eating two meals a day, but you have a big appetite like me, I know myself and I would overconsume on those 2 meals I ate, because by the time that next meal came, I'd be so ravenous that I'd get up for seconds and thirds and fulfill that appetite. So it really is a personal choice and figuring out what schedule works for you. There are studies that have actually shown that eating too frequently can be harmful. A new study recently came out saying that eating meals more frequently increased liver and abdominal fat even when calories stayed the same. Just one study, but again, it totally comes down to personal preference.
Personal preference, lifestyle, exactly. Like what are your eating behaviors, mm-hmm. and stress level, mm-hmm. a lot of that plays
appetite,
right?
Schedule,
fucking everything, man. Okay. So the next myth we're going to go into is egg yolks should be avoided because they're high in cholesterol, which drives heart disease. So basically, I mean, this egg theory goes back and forth so many times. It just blows my mind. I just am getting tired of it. But we've been advised to cut back on whole eggs because the yolks are high in cholesterol. However, cholesterol in the diet has remarkable little effect on cholesterol in the blood, at least for the majority of people. So there was a review of 17 studies with a total of 263,938 participants that show that eating eggs had no effect on the risk of heart disease or stroke in non-diabetic individuals. However, keep in mind that some studies have found an increased heart attack risk in diabetics who eat eggs. So, whole eggs really are among the most nutritious foods on the planet, and almost all the nutrients are found in the yolk itself. Telling people to throw yolks away may be not the wisest advice in the history of nutrition. I get it. But the thing you guys have to keep in mind is, let's say in your diet you don't eat enough cholesterol. Your body makes up for that cholesterol that you don't eat.
Yeah.
If you eat too much cholesterol, your body compensates and makes less of its own cholesterol. Like your body has a self-sustaining mechanism already going on that you don't know about. So does that mean you should go ahead and eat that 28 yolk omelet every day? No, but if you eat egg yolks pretty regularly on a moderate basis, then it's not going to affect your cholesterol.
Right. And we did a whole episode on eggs. If you want to hear more about that, please feel free to go back and listen to it, because the research has gone back and forth for so long. So the next one is one that really hits home to me. It's that coffee is unhealthy and should be avoided. Coffee has long been considered unhealthy, mainly because of the caffeine. However, most studies actually show that caffeine has powerful health benefits. This means coffee. This does not mean your triple shot, triple pump, iced vanilla latte.
Bang energy.
Right.
Your bang models.
This means like coffee, not your foo-foo lattes with 60 grams of sugar. We're talking about...
Ooh, she's hating on you foo-foo latte drinkers.
We're talking about just coffee here. Maybe like a little bit of whatever sweetener, or a little bit of almond milk, or whatever you prefer to use. But we're not talking about your Starbucks runs with 60 grams of sugar. Anyways, moving on. So this is due to the fact that coffee actually has a lot of antioxidants, and surprisingly, but also not unsurprisingly, coffee is the highest source of antioxidants in the Western diet, more than fruit, more than vegetables. So combined. So get your antioxidants from coffee, but get the fruit and vegetables too. But in the Western diet, yeah, we get a lot of our antioxidants from coffee. Coffee drinkers actually have a much lower risk of depression, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and some studies actually show that people who drink coffee live longer than those that don't drink coffee.
Oh, so watch out. Watch out, you tea drinking yogis.
I mean, I'm sure tea has... I don't think tea has ever been considered unhealthy. So it's not necessarily, so tea does have great antioxidant benefits as well. But us Westerners love our coffee.
Oh man, we can't function without our coffee.
Seriously?
I cannot. Look at this cup. In case you guys can't see it, I am holding a cup right now full of coffee.
Watch the YouTube video.
Yeah. So the next myth is losing weight is all about willpower and eating less and exercising more. I hear this shit all the time. So weight loss and gain is often assumed to be all about willpower and calories in versus calorie out. Well, let me tell you this. The human body is a highly complex biological system with many hormones and brain centers that regulate when, what, and how much we should eat. It is well known that genetics, hormones, and various external factors have a huge impact on body weight. So although it's still the individual's responsibility to do something about their weight problem, I'm air quoting right now, blaming obesity on some sort of moral failure is very unhelpful and very inaccurate. I mean, like I hear this all the time. I mean, I even hear it in my family. So,
yeah, there's so much more to it. There's a whole political aspect to it. There's a whole medical aspect, like, you know, big pharma and things like that, which kind of goes in hand with politics, but we're not going to get too political on this episode. So there are a lot of different factors. So we'll just kind of dive into the our closing thoughts. So sometimes it does seem like these myths just pop out of thin air. But the reality is that there usually is some sort of study that initiates it. But what we typically don't consider is the details of the study. So I'm talking about the methods, the participants, the study design. So without knowing those details, you can't fully form a conclusion about X, Y, and Z claim. Nutrition will always be controversial because different things work for different people. There are many factors that will influence the foods in your diet. We've talked about a lot of these before, but allergies, intolerances, food preference, religion, culture, geographical location, activity level, income level, and lifestyle are just some of the few things that will affect what foods are actually in your diet. So the main takeaway is do not take anything seriously on the surface level. Do your research, preferably from peer-reviewed sources. Google Scholar and PubMed are free resources, but other credible places you can look are Science Daily, Medical News Today, Today's Dietitian, and NIH.gov. Other, like, sometimes credible source, I don't want to say credible, but like places to get your like general information are like the New York Times, the Atlantic, and the Washington Post. You can read an article, but it's important to remember that these sources will more than likely reference a credible study, but they'll write it in a narrative that can sometimes lead to more rumors and myths. So proceed with caution. Good place to get a surface level idea, but then you definitely want to dig deeper into either peer-reviewed or the other credible sources that we talked about. I do want to touch briefly on the levels of credible and non-credible. So the kind of least credible type of research are your case reports, opinion papers, and individual experiences with things. The most credible and the strongest type of research are your meta-analysis and your systemic reviews. Below that are your randomized control trials, cohort studies, case control studies, cross-sectional studies, and animal trials are right above case studies. So I'm sorry to the Insta models who are out there saying, it worked for me. This is considered a personal anecdote and is discredited by most well-educated individuals. Personal anecdotes are not credible sources. Sorry.
It's not, but unfortunately, so many people, especially if you look on Instagram, like they don't even have to be Insta models. They can be a doctor that's newly venturing in the field of nutrition that says, "Oh, it definitely worked for me. So how can you tell me it doesn't work for me if it could work for you? You just have to try it." Like you can't say anything unless you try it. So
because technically, there's nothing illegal about saying it worked for me. And that's why they say it. Nothing illegal about it. And that's the tricky part, because when you constantly say it worked for me, it's giving people hope that it's going to work for them. And it might. I'm, not saying that it won't, but it's also not a extremely credible source.
Oh, man.
Especially if it's like some wonky, like, supplement or whatever.
Let me give you something wonky. You probably saw it on the Dietetics Anonymous, but it was a comment underneath a fasting post, and someone said, "You know what worked for me? I sucked on Himalayan pink salt, and it definitely helped me while I was fasting. You should try it." I was like, "What the fuck? I'm not sucking on anything."
I don't want Alzheimer's.
Oh, you don't want. But it's pink Himalayan, so it's healthy.
Oh man. it's actually like not any more healthy. But
I mean, in fact, there's no iodine in it, so yay, goiters. So that was our episode on urban nutrition myths. So I hope that got you into that little spooky spirit. I'm thinking a little bit spooked. I'm a little bit annoyed, but so with that being said, we're going to give our social media shout out to @Miss Terrific, and she is from California in the Bay Area, and she has a master's in nutritional science. She's just going to be a future dietitian, and she also is a first-generation Mexican American. So kudos to you.
Awesome.
And thank you so much for your support. We do recognize it, and you guys should definitely check out her page.
Definitely, yeah. So thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Let us know your thoughts on these nutrition myths, and please always send us wonky stuff when you see it. We always like a good laugh. So if you have any other topics you'd like for us to discuss, please let us know.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode, and have a safe Halloween.
Yes.
Really don't do anything that I would not do. Just saying.
Well, you would do a lot, so that's not saying a lot.
Damn, dude.
Bye. All right, bye guys. Catch you next time. Thanks for listening to the Keeping It Juicy podcast.
Your main squeeze in nutrition.
Don't forget to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for a brand new episode.
Also, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Keeping It Juicy Podcast.
We'd love to hear from you, so please leave us a review.
5 stars, no less.
On whatever platform you're listening to, or send us an email at keepingitjuicypodcast@gmail.com.
Or if you have any topics you'd like for us to touch upon, shoot us an email. Until next time, don't do anything that I wouldn't do.